I think I put on a couple of pounds because I had a Big Mac attack for lunch.
All right, so we're on. So welcome to the Active Investor Club Opportunity Dinner. My name is Chris Koomey, and for all the folks that are in the Active Investor Club, I want to thank you for joining us. And one of the goals of the Active Investor Club is to expose you to opportunities, expose you to ideas that you can take advantage of in your success plan. And to be successful as an active investor, our perspective is that we need to start with a success plan where we identify what your individual goals are. We have that on a foundation of preservation, and then we generate a number of income strategies as well as wealth creation strategies. And one of my preferred ways for wealth creation is investing in startups. And today we're going to take a look at one of the startups I've invested in, and it's a really exciting one. It's called Agrismart, and it's located here in the DC metro area, but it's also located halfway across the earth in Ivory Coast. And so I have H. David Meyer here, one of the visionaries and founders of Agrismart. And H came to me about 5 years ago, and he had this idea. And at the core of the idea was he wanted to do well by doing good and really use business to make an impact on people's lives. And Agrismart was the vision of how to do well by doing good. And one of the things we've talked about with our Active Investor Club is how important it is to be an impact entrepreneur. And so Agrismart is a great demonstration of how you can take your passion to make an impact on the world and also be building a viable, exciting business. And so tell us a little bit about Agrismart and what it does now. We'll go back. I'll give you a chance to talk about the history as well. But what does Agrismart do right now?
Agrismart signed a contract with the Ivory Coast government to farm literally 1.2 million acres. And the interesting part about the Ivory Coast, or Cote d'Ivoire, is that it's the fastest growing economy in all of Africa and the second fastest growing economy, according to the Economist magazine, in the world. And their real oil is in their soil. I mean, they have the ability, they have the world's richest farmland. In fact, I like to say that if you stuck your arm in the ground in the Ivory Coast, you'll begin to grow. So they have a year-round growing season, and there are two products that we were very interested in. We were interested in corn farming because we knew we could have about 2.5 yields a year compared to only one yield in Iowa or in the United States, for example. And we knew that we could also farm palm oil. But I do want to say something right at the outset because palm oil is an inflammatory, product. Malaysia and Indonesia and some countries around the world have destroyed habitat and forest in order to grow palm oil because it's so lucrative. And the reason it's so lucrative is that you can produce 6, 7 tons an acre. They call it hectares. And in some cases, 18 to 20 tons on a hectare, which, by the way, is 2.47 acres if anybody wants to do the mathematics to it. So it's a very valuable crop. And the issue about palm oil is that it grows naturally and indigenously in the Ivory Coast, as well as in the Congo and in Liberia and Ghana, for example, in West Africa. So what they did in Malaysia and Indonesia, which controls about 90% of the world's palm oil production, basically is that they took the seedlings from the Congo and from the Ivory Coast and replanted them in areas where it doesn't grow indigenously or naturally. So we decided that we were going to be involved in palm oil because we thought it was the fastest way to provide jobs and also a return for our investor,
And let's get to that. I mean, so you have a lease from the Ivory Coast government for over 1 million acres.
1.2 million acres.
And what was the motivation of the Ivory Coast government to lease you this 1 million acres?
Well, it all has to do with jobs. Jobs are the single most important thing that we can do in third world countries. If we provide a job, that means that we can provide hope and spirit and put smiles on people's faces. We can provide them with housing, and health care, and literally clean water.
And we know, Ivory Coast has about, 25% unemployment? Is that the official rate?
The official rate may be 25%, but that's not close to really what the actual rate is.
Yeah.
If you go into areas like Boaké, where we're heavily concentrated, I was with my chief of staff, Walt Warmay, who's looking on here, and he said, David, there can't possibly be 2 million people here. We're coming in on a single road. I don't see any people. I said, just keep your eyes fixed. You'll see. We went another block or so, and there were a few hundred people. We went another block or so, another quarter of a mile, and there was 200,000 people. And before long, there were 2 million people. He went, where did all these people come from? Well, they need jobs, and the unemployment rate in places like Boiscay has to border on over 50%, 40 to 50%.
And one of the most powerful things about the vision of Agrismart for me was it wasn't just jobs, because what you were looking at is building communities, providing healthcare, providing school.
Right, exactly.
So talk a little bit about what your vision of having your 5,000 acre blocks
Right.
and how that's going to operate.
Well, the way we envision it is that we were going to take about 1 million acres of corn land and provide it about 50, let me get this straight, about 5,000 acre tracts, okay? And I think it was 200 farms equals 1 million acres. And we were going to be training, and we are training people to actually be able to farm using modern mechanized equipment. And what's interesting about the farms is that we're going to leave the natural landscape intact because we have all the land we really want. Anybody like to know 1 million acres, 1.2 million acres is 1,870 square miles. That's an awfully large tract of land. And we have it in 8 different tracts. So we're training farmers to be able to produce crops on their own farms. And for example, we have millions of metric tons of wood that can be used for wood chips and can be used for wood pellets to really power industry, for example. And so we have the ability to create beautiful farms involving wooden fences, for example. We're going to be using 100,000-pound bulldozers from Caterpillar that can clear land at a very, very quick rate. I think it's 2 Caterpillar tractors. The 1060s can clear up to, I think it's, is it about 5,000 acres in about 16, 17 days? It's really remarkable how fast they can operate.
And so let's get on the doing well by doing good. One of your motivations was the healthcare,
Yes.
the schools, the
Yes.
opportunities. And so
Right.
talk about what the vision of Agrismart is for Ivory Coast.
Well, the first thing is we, in exchange for the land, promised the government that we would create thousands of jobs. And we're already doing that. We're already employing hundreds of farmers. By the end of this year, we'll have more than 1,000 farmers working for us, as well as our plant workers as well. So our vision was to pay them a little bit more than they would ordinarily make and use part of their money to provide for healthcare services in the form of medical mobile vans, for example. Our workers have boots. They have gloves, heavy gloves. They're working with machinery. The first thing that we did when we went there was we said we want our workers to have the proper equipment. And so by providing them with a job, we're able to provide them with a housing experience. We're able to provide them with the ability to create clean water and to be able to have a decent roof over their head and to create housing.
And one of the things we know, like if we have a project at home and if we have the right tool, it gets done pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have the wrong tool, it takes about 6 times as long.
Well,
And so tell a little bit about your experience. Basically, what you found is that the folks in the Ivory Coast haven't had the right tools.
well, they not only haven't had the right tools, they haven't had any tools.
Yeah.
So in our first trips to the Ivory Coast, literally, I traveled thousands of miles to the outlying regions. We didn't see one working tractor on the most beautiful farm areas of the world. And we marveled about this. Not one working tractor in millions, tens of millions of acres of the most beautiful farmland in the world. And remember, they have 2.5 growing seasons. And we were watching them plant corn by hand. And in case the viewers would like to know, anybody wants to guess how many stalks of corn there are on an acre, it's between 30 and 40,000 stalks on an acre. Can you imagine planting that many by hand? So they only plant very few on an acre, and they're able to feed their village when they have the ability to feed the whole region by just using mechanized equipment. And this is a story about tools. So we talked to some of the farmers and discovered that it takes them about 3 days to clear 1 acre for palm oil. And it takes us, using motorized equipment, we probably can clear the fruit and process the fruit from 5 hectares in one day. That's a 15-time factor. And they have to carry the fruit, sometimes as much as a half a mile or more, half a kilometer. But on my last trip, I found out they were traveling even further than we thought. And it's heavy breaking work. And just the fact that we provide single cylinder tractors with a 1.5 ton capacity trailer behind it means that they can increase the efficiency by 4, 5-fold, 7-fold, 10-fold. It's amazing how much more work they can do. And there's an unlimited world market for palm oil.
And as members of the Active Investor Club, one of the things that we talk about is we don't want to look for just any old opportunity. We want to look for an opportunity where a company is taking a proven innovation and applying it into a new field.
Yes.
And so basically what Agrismart's doing is taking modern machinery, modern farming techniques, and applying it in Africa, where currently they're doing a lot of things by hand. The average size of a Ivory Coast farm is about 8 acres, and you're talking about farming 5,000 acres. And so what we're doing is taking something that we know works, right? It's people do it in Iowa, they do it all over the world, and now Africa is just opening up.
This is a really important point that I want to interject. And you're a fantastic interviewer, the best actually. But this is a really important point because the farmers there are working in areas that are stricken with malaria and with Zika. 100% of the people in the areas we work in get malaria. 100%. Okay, very few people do not get it. So, and we were actually working. One of our plant leaders, Mr. Kamara, who runs our plant operations, has his own 75-acre farm where he provides palm oil. They use no fertilizer and no pesticide. We are involved strictly in organic fertilizers and organic pesticides. And his experience was by using just a small amount of fertilizer, doubled the yield from his farm in there was 1 year. In 1 year, they literally doubled the capacity that he had. And our goal is the following. Our goal is to literally use this modern organic compound, which is safe enough to drink. And if you want to get back to it, I can tell you a delightful story about that. It's safe enough to drink, and we want people to know that they don't have to suffer through this blight because all the areas we're working in, we've already decided that we want it to be malaria-free and Zika-free. And the organic compound which we're working with, which is in use in about 18 American states and a number of foreign countries, was just approved by the Geneva Convention, where they were working on Zika control and malaria control. It was a conference, and literally it means that we can increase production at the same time reduce disease.
And certainly, one of the challenges in Africa, the history of companies going to Africa has been that they haven't been looking out for the locals, and they haven't been treating the land with respect.
No.
And I think that's one of the powerful things. That's why the Ivory Coast government puts its trust in Agrismart, is the idea of sustainable agricultural practices.
Sustainable green agricultural products, which is exactly what we're all about. So I want to emphasize this if I can. The reason we started with palm oil first is because it was the fastest way that we knew to return, dividends to our investors. Okay, and we knew that if we started in palm oil, we were only interested in dealing in crops that had an unlimited ceiling. Last year, there were 56 million metric tons of palm oil produced throughout the world. They say that the need for palm oil, which, by the way, is in half the products in the grocery stores. You can check it. Go to Giant, go to Harris Tweeter, and check the labels. You see palm oils and everything. Palm oil is a very, very valuable product. And we're doing it in places where habitat and forestry is not being destroyed. We're actually a godsend for the protesters, because the protesters are opposed to places like Malaysia and Indonesia, where they produce billions of dollars worth of palm oil every year, but they've done it at the expense of the local habitat and forest.
And what's amazing,
and we're not doing that.
From what you've told me is, a lot of the palm oil pods have just gone to waste over the years. They basically, there's no way to get them to market. There's no way to process them. And what Agrismart's doing is basically providing a way for hundreds of farmers to be able to use what they already have and start making money from it.
Right. One of our philosophies was that we wanted to go to the outlying areas, the farmers that really didn't have a market for their fruit. And we basically were uh, informed by Phenacopacea, which is their association of palm oil producers. They have 43,000 farmers that are part of their cooperative. They informed us that many of their farmers don't get their fruit to market. Some only get 50% of their fruit to market. Some get as little as 10% of their fruit to market, which means 90% is going untapped. So we decided that we were going to get our own trucks. We bought our own trucks. We've already set up contracts with the local farmers who are beyond the areas that the major palm oil producers get their fruit from. They get it normally from commercial, plantations. And we wanted to get the fruit directly from the farmers so we could give them a job and an opportunity to make more money. And we also found that producing, farming is hard work. I mean, literally hard work. And without modern mechanized equipment, you could lose your incentive to work in a hurry, especially knowing that the pods weigh 35 pounds. One of our pods weighed 70 pounds. They call it fruit. I call it pods. It's pods of fruit. And if you go on our website, Agrismart, you can see pictures of what palm oil fruit looks like. But we felt that the farmers carrying these loads to the side of a road was a really very backward way to go. And we discovered that the local companies did not care about the workers. And what we cared about more than anything was for them to have a housing opportunity, to have clean water, and to have energy, and to have a job. The job was the single most important factor, so we could bring in medical mobile vans that could actually provide basic medical care for children and for their, for everybody in the region, not just people who work for us, but everybody who lives in that region. So we discovered that if we could provide them with these implements, that they wouldn't have to walk a half a mile. They wouldn't have to carry 70 and 100 pounds of fruit, literally backbreaking labor, long distances. And then we discovered that it takes 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to take down a 30. And there's pictures, I think, on the website of me taking down actually pods of fruit. I mean, it's backbreaking labor. And we discovered we could do it in seconds, whereas they took minutes to do it.
And what's powerful is this isn't just sustainable. What you're doing, these pods have been growing for hundreds of years and no one is taking advantage of them. So what you're creating is some efficiency and making it so the farmers are getting more potential out of what they've got.
My chief of staff, Walt Wormy, is here right now. He's not on camera, but he's going to smile when I say this because we've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, I went into areas that were overgrown with 6 feet of grass, and they have the farmers walking literally through 6 feet of grass to get to these pods. And I have to tell you, this is kind of amazing in a way. Here I am, basically, I'm a New Yorker, okay? Probably hard to figure that out. And I asked them, I said, so tell me, what kind of animals do you have in the areas of our palm oil plantations? And they said, well, we have leopards. And I'm like, well, that's great. I haven't seen one yet. And I said, what kind of snakes do you have? And they said, well, we have cobras, black mambas, green mambas, and Gabon vipers. And I'm like, whoa. It's like the top 3 or 4 in the top 10 deadliest snakes in the world. And so literally we have our own plant. We bought our own plant, multi-million-dollar plant, which is about the size of a football field, by the way. And in the last month alone, they've actually killed a cobra, a black mamba, and a green mamba, and a Gabon viper. And I'm like, wow, this is a fantastic place to work. And they said, yeah, it is, because when they killed the cobra, they actually ate it for lunch.
Yeah.
And they loved it. They say it's quite a delicacy, and python is their favorite, by the way.
So one of the things that, for folks that invest in startups, one of the things we know is that there's never a straight line.
No.
Right.
Oh, no.
And so originally Agrismart's name was CornSmart.
That's right.
And the vision was really primarily focused on growing crops.
Right.
But after you got started, the first thing is now processing the palm oil.
Right.
So talk about how your original focus changed based on where the opportunities were.
Well, when we started off, we knew that we could raise a lot of corn. And in fact, we have a signed contract with a major government to provide them with 6 million metric tons of corn, which is $1.1 billion on the open market right now. So we knew that whatever we could produce, we could sell. We're very excited about that. But in order to produce corn, we suddenly realized, and we kind of knew it all along, really, that it was going to take far more dollars as a startup than we could hope to do without proving the concept first. And I think we have proved the concept at this point.
And no farmer has ever said it was easy.
No farmer ever said it was easy.
People have been farming for a while, but no one's ever said it's easy.
No one ever said it was easy. But the interesting part is we were in an area where they had twice the rainfall that we have in Iowa, for example. They have like 79 inches a year. On the Maryland Eastern Shore, I think they have about 37 or 38 inches a year, whatever it is. And it turns out that we could grow more corn with an extra ear perhaps on a stalk. And it made a lot of sense. But we really wanted to use our investment capital to be able to create more capital in a quicker fashion. So we discovered that we had the opportunities with government personnel and with private entrepreneurs in the Ivory Coast that we would have the leverage to be able to produce our own palm oil, for example. And we learned a lot about how the Ivory Coast is a very proud producer of palm oil, and it's really dead center. It is literally dead center for the natural production of palm oil. And in case people would like to know, palm oil is the closest product in nature to biodiesel. And one of our aims actually is to produce biodiesel so that we can reduce pollution, provide 15 times more jobs than petro fuels provide, for example. And we could also, literally put smiles on the faces of our truck drivers, knowing that they're polluting less and they're providing jobs for their family, their neighbors, and their countrymen. So we decided that palm oil was a good idea because we knew the market was very extensive. In the next 20 years, economists already forecast that the market will increase to 264 million metric tons of palm oil. It's only at 56 million metric tons now. So that'll tell you that's a 400% increase. So I knew that was the right direction. But I also knew that palm oil was going to increase in price, which it did. And it is continuing to increase in price.
And I want to point out to members of the Active Investor Club, folks that are watching this, one of the most important things that's motivating Agrismart is to make sure that the investors are getting paid on their capital.
That's it.
And I'll tell you, this is something where a lot of people that are out looking for money, they're looking out for themselves and the company. They're not looking out for their investors. And if you're wondering why your investors aren't that quick to write a check, it's because you don't have the investor's best interest at heart. And so when did Agrismart start taking money from investors? About 2 years ago?
About 2 years ago. And I have to say that our first interest was to make sure that our investors were investing in a solid opportunity. One of the things I've done in my lifetime is back in the 70s when we were involved in credit card marketing, for example, we created a card called secured credit card, known as a debit card. And everybody laughed at us because they thought it was impossible for us to give credit to people who didn't have, the proper credit. And I finally said, you know what, we'll create our own bank. We hired Mickey Mantle. We hired other celebrities to advertise that. And I thought we could produce 10 million accounts nationally for debit cards. Well, I was wrong. There's billions of credit cards throughout the world now. So I already had somewhat of a track record for doing things that were unconventional, to say the least.
But also very conscious of the investors. And so here you are 2 years in, and you were telling me, what are your expectations in July?
Yeah, we're really excited because our tanks are filled with palm oil, and our trucks are beginning to go out. Last month and the month before, we started billing our first. We were actually billing our first product, and it was just really exciting for me. And I couldn't sleep at night unless we had our Agrismart investors first in mind. And everyone who knows me knows that the first thing I care about is our investors. I've been around the block a lot of times. I've had a fun career. For me, the most important thing in the world is to see people really do well by doing, in this case, doing well by doing good. So our tanks are full right now. We're actually shipping oil to Ghana. We're also shipping oil locally. We've already bought out a second plant. And the thing that excited me more than anything was that we really lucked into this. I mean, it's funny.
And I wanted you to say that because that's part of every startup.
We really lucked into it because, and I think good luck has to do with a lot of hard work too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like we weren't working constantly. We work 24 hours a day. We're thinking about this 24 hours a day. We have the most vibrant, intelligent staff. I mean, we have people who really care. So we kind of lucked into this. We were able to buy a plant that hadn't operated in a year because the plant operators, their major goal was biodiesel in Italy. And they decided that they couldn't use the biodiesel in Italy, so they spent millions of dollars, spent $3 million to build this incredible plant. And we realized we could pick it up for like about 1.7 million is what we thought we could pick it up for. And it turned out we actually did, in fact, pick it up for a little less than that. But then the dollar went up. The dollar went up in relation to the Ivory Coast currency, the CFA. So we wound up spending 1.51 million for a plant that we knew was worth 3 million in the first place. And then we were able to get equipment from a second plant, which is now being shipped to our first plant, doubling its size. And now we figure our plant is worth anywhere for more than twice what we paid for. So we actually made money on our asset line. It was pure luck. It wasn't because the chairman had any genius idea. We just thought that it was a great business to be in.
But it was the importance of being in motion and being engaged with where your core business,
Right.
so you could be available to opportunities as they came.
You know, the one thing I've learned in business, and I tell everybody I'm 53, but I guess I'm not. And I have the background, educationally, I grew up on the streets of New York, but I have a doctoral degree in law, as you do. And, I never realized that this one phrase was the most important phrase in all of business. There's one word that is really the difference between winners and losers in business, and that is perseverance. If you are willing to keep trudging forward, if you won't stop, if you really believe in something and you won't let anybody stop you, then you will be successful. It is the single most important component in a successful business is perseverance.
I'm going to recommend my new favorite movie to you. And so it's called The Founder. And it's about the founder of McDonald's. And it came out last year or something like that. And it talks about how, the McDonald brothers started McDonald's. And then it's the story of Ray Kroc and how he started franchising. But one of the things that I loved about it was the McDonald brothers told about their perseverance to get to that model.
Yeah.
They'd put together 3 or 4 different businesses that had some level of success and then failed. Some level of success and failed. The first day McDonald's opened, they did everything you're supposed to do. Like they had, the marching band, they had the mayor cut the ribbon, everyone in town was there. So they're really excited until a swarm of bees came and chased everybody off. And
they had people sitting on benches having their lunch, right? It's not a good idea sitting outside. Yeah.
And so they thought it was such a disaster that the next day they were already planning to mothball the shop and close it up. And a little boy came up and bought a sack of burgers. And they were just like, well, we'll just give it to him for free because we're closing up. We got some extra meat. And then people started to come. And then so the movie is all about how perseverance is the key to business. And failure is a choice for people in business. And when you're a startup, it's all about having that perseverance and continuing to engage.
Going back to the Ray Kroc story, I believe that the original McDonald brothers actually tried the franchising on their own, and they opened like 5 shops, and they all failed. And they all failed because they were learning literally on the job that they needed quality control.
Well, but actually part of the movie also went that Ray Kroc had that same thing.
He failed too.
So he failed multiple times.
He failed miserably at the beginning.
And so, he sold it to a friend and they started selling chicken and they started, everything was different. And he realized how he had to find the right business model.
And then Ray Kroc found out that it wasn't hamburgers that were profitable. He found out that their business really wasn't hamburgers at all. It was real estate. He found out if they bought the property, literally, that would be their successful model, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. And the movie goes into that. And so I think you'll enjoy that watch because the whole theme is about perseverance.
And I should mention that we've signed a contract, which was approved by the Parliament.
We're going to get that. We're going to get to that.
Because I was going to tell you about the land situation. Yeah, okay. That's really an amazing story. Yeah.
But even so starting off, with 2 years in, you're generating revenue, you're expecting to be generating revenue next month. And you're also just now really getting started on cultivating the land.
Yeah.
And so with that, once that land is cultivated, you said you had commitment for 1.1 billion dollars.
Literally, yeah.
And we've done the math before, but 1 million acres of corn can produce about $1 million worth of corn.
No, no,
A
no.
billion, I mean,
You
$1
mean
billion,
a
$1 billion
billion.
dollars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, easily
And
that
so,
much. Yeah, more than that.
And so that's what's exciting is the potential to tap into that and get that $1 billion is basically in action, and there's revenue to support it, and there's equipment that's in place that's going to start positioning the company to take advantage of that.
See, we have our model, for example, and what we're doing right now is we have large orders for palm oil. We have minimum orders of 5,000 metric tons from different companies, and they're standing in line to take our palm oil. But it means, and this is what I've discovered, it means that you have to develop the farming, you have to develop the pods, the fruit, you have to develop the plant, you have to learn how to operate a plant, by the way. We're involved in a 5-year course in college, 4 or 5-year course in college of learning how to do everything. And we've learned how to do it fast, really fast. We have our own welders to produce our own, literally to fix our own issues at the plant. We know how to build a plant. We have the people that can build another plant right on the spot where we are now. And we have discovered that there are so many things that you have to do to prepare for being able to ship large amounts of product. Now, we have the ability now to create a plant that can produce 5,000 metric tons in 3 to 6 months. We know that we can get up to 10,000 metric tons in 11 to 12 months. And those are large dollars. I mean, we're talking 5,000 metric tons is probably about $4 million a month. That's $48 million a year. And we're already talking about being at 10,000 metric tons at the end of 12 months. And now it's not just us guessing anymore. We've produced the oil and we've actually sold it. And incidentally, we have been billing oil for the last month, to many different buyers.
Right.
So we've done it in smaller lots. And now what we're doing is we're just taking a small grocery store. That's really what we're doing. It's the first giant store. We've actually created our first little tiny grocery store, and we're now expanding it. So it goes from here to here. And in another 3 to 6 months, hopefully closer than 6 months, we'll be ready to ship to our large buyers, because the large buyers want it shipped literally in chips.
And part of the power. So now we have the palm oil business, and then the process to develop the corn business.
Right.
And so as that happens, now one of the things is that people in Africa have been looking around and saying, "Hey, what are these guys doing?" And so tell about the second big deal.
Oh,
you got into.
Actually, you really jumped the gun here, because the other big deal was the energy deal. Because what happened to us, which is really remarkable, was that I went to a conference in Baltimore, and once again, this is a story of a blind squirrel that bumps into an acorn every once in a while, and I met the people from literally NRECA, which is the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. So who are they? Well, they produce 900 power plants, everything from nuclear to hydroelectric to solar, you name it, they've done it. They're in 47 states in America and in 43 countries around the world. And I ran into one of the directors, and they said, H. David, we like the way you do things. We would be very interested in putting in a 100 megawatt program in the Ivory Coast. And they said, no, not 100, 500 megawatt program, which would involve 1.6 million solar panels and provide jobs for thousands and thousands of people. And so we are now presently working on that. We're actually waiting for a memorandum of understanding to be signed with the government, because it means jobs in rural areas of the Ivory Coast that can use this power and can, of course, use the jobs, which means everything down the line. And we would actually be responsible. And the government's already given us the land anywhere they deem it the best place to put this power operation. And 500 megawatts represents 25% of the Ivory Coast total power output.
And 25% is a lot.
It's a lot. But, they have just developed $2 billion in investment to really upgrade their power lines and to expand their power facilities. So by accident, once again, us lucking into this, we got together with people, and I introduced them to the leaders of the country. so that they can present their proposal and they can produce a kilowatt hour at much less expensive cost than anybody else can because they're a nonprofit. You know, not a small nonprofit, a huge nonprofit. And so we're actually waiting on French-speaking engineers from the plant, which, by the way, is here. Their headquarters are here in Arlington, of all places, which was where we're broadcasting from,
Right.
which is really amazing. And so we're actually waiting on talking. In fact, I could get a phone call momentarily, or I'd be on the next plane to talk to the Minister of Energy about getting this whole program started. What really is interesting here is that the country has already decided to allocate the 3,000 acres that they would need for this project anywhere where they deem it, most
Optimal.
efficacious. Yeah.
And what's exciting about this is that, the business model was to grow corn
Right.
and then to produce palm oil.
Right.
And now it's producing energy. But then also there's a number of other side business opportunities
It's
that are
unlimited.
still available.
It's unlimited. It's trucking. You name it. There are so many different avenues that we can explore at this point. But I want to mention that, Ambassador Diabate, the U.S. Ambassador from the Ivory Coast, said to me, David, we're so glad that you brought NRECA to us because your program involved corn, palm oil, and energy. And I smiled and I said, yes, I think we're actually going to be able to do all three by the end of 2017. So, we raised all of our initial capital that we wanted to raise. Now we're in a position where we actually have a chance to go after the big dogs. And so that's really the exciting opportunity for us. But the opportunities in West Africa, and I believe this with every single, cell in my body, that West Africa represents an incredible opportunity. It may be the place where more billionaires are made than anywhere else in the world. And they have the opportunity to feed the world.
And when we're looking for opportunities, what we want to do is go to a place with great potential and where all the pieces are in place. And, Africa has been perfectly lined up and people have been looking to it and waiting for that to happen. But as we were talking before, Africa right now is slotted to become, to be home to 6 of the top 10 most populous nations by 2050.
Right.
And the population growth is amazing, but also they've been able to skip over a lot of the technology. Like, what is that you're pressing buttons on?
I knew you wanted to know that. I don't know if you could see a picture of this. If it's possible, I would love for you to see a picture of this because I was in an outlying region where, I was dealing with farmers that have really no modern equipment whatsoever. And I wanted to make a point that the reason why Africa is different today to invest in than ever was before has to do with, like, for example, modern innovations like cell phones. So I had all the farmers raise their hands with their cell phones because there are more cell phone users in Africa than any other continent in the world. And even though they may live in a mud hut that has a thatched roof, okay, and they may have goats running in and out, and they really have difficulty in securing medical care and clean water and everything else, there's one thing they do have. They have a cell phone, and they know exactly how we live. They know exactly what the cities look like. They know what modern structures look like. So now things are moving more rapidly because they can see what it is that we're doing, because they can actually see it. Things change more rapidly.
And
They
I'll
have
tell you,
greater expectations.
And one of the things for active investors, there's always this balance of risk versus reward. And when you mention doing business in Africa, people that have been trained to be risk averse, right? We know some of those people.
Yeah.
And they're so afraid to do something, but if you're never taking a risk, you're not going to have that great reward. And so part of it is we don't want to take unnecessary risks, but we want to take calculated risks where the reward outweighs the possibilities. And that's what Africa represents right now.
Now, I want to go back to the example of Time Saver, MasterCard, and Visa. When we first, we were the country's largest marketer of credit cards, Time Saver. And so I went to our banking friends. We marketed for more than 80 banks when banks had their little serfdoms, Manufacturers Hanover Trust had their little area for Master Charge in New York and Connecticut and New Jersey. And Citicorp had their little fiefdom for Master Charge in the same areas. And Chase Manhattan Bank had not Visa, but Bank Americard, and Bank of America had California. I said, this is all ridiculous. I said, we've got 70% of our people being turned down for credit cards. why don't you allow someone to put money in an account? And you can put money in an account, secure the account, and then you can give them credit. Well, I want you to know that Senator Hartke from Indiana, who was on our board, we went to visit the 8 largest banks in America. And they said, this is a huge risk. This is a huge risk. We're not willing to take it. And we thought they were out of their minds because this was like the biggest part of their business. And it is the biggest part of their business today. And we said, you know what? We'll start Key Financial out of Newark, Delaware. And we got together with Key Federal and we started Key Financial. And that's a well-known story of how we started. And we got famous people like Mickey Mantle and all kinds of celebrities to advertise the new secured credit cards, which today are known as debit cards. In any event, we did that for years, 7 or 8 years before literally Capital One and other banks came along and said, you know, this looks like a good idea. Well, yeah, we already spent tens of millions of dollars doing it. And it all had to do with what you call risk versus reward. In the case of what we're doing here in West Africa is we know we have the world's best farmland. We know that we have literally hundreds of millions of people that need, food product. We need farmland to cultivate. And so it makes sense from every point of view. And we said if we took modern mechanized equipment and we gave people jobs and taught them how to farm in a more progressive and a modern fashion, that we also, in the process, would also make a lot of money for our investors.
And, one of the things that I talk about, members of the Active Investor Club know this. For any good opportunity, what you have to do is pull out your crazy meter, because you got to have a crazy meter.
That's good.
And the thing is, it's not that you're trying to find something that's not crazy.
Yeah.
You want an idea that enough people think is crazy that you understand better than them. Because if everyone thinks it's a great idea, it's probably not going to work. Right? If everybody agrees, like if all 8 of those banks said this is going to be a great idea, it probably would have flopped.
Not that idea. No, that idea was too big.
But again, it has to be a little crazy and outside their comfort level.
Yeah.
It can't be that obvious. And I think that's the opportunity in Africa, is that it's not that obvious. People are afraid. And where in this case, you have a partnership with the government.
But I would like to mention that there are other safeguards as well. The Ivory Coast has been an independent nation since 1960. So it's been, if my math is correct, 40 and 17 makes 57. So it's 57 years. Not one company has ever had their operations taken over by the government, regardless of any political, disunity or whatever. The fact is that it's very corporate friendly, and that companies feel very confident about coming into the Ivory Coast and doing business.
And there was just an election last year that represented continuity. The two parties came together.
Right.
So
they've had their differences, and for example, there are military combatants in the Boaké region, for example, that have had their issues with regard to back pay and so on. What we want to do is we want to promise them an opportunity to participate in a modern economy, and that's one reason why the NRCA deal was so good, was because we promised that we would provide the people in Boaké with a job opportunity. And the president of Boaké region, President Abunwa, was like, we love your idea. It's fantastic. We'll provide the land if you'll provide this electric project for us. And in addition to the electric project, when that starts, the corn farming will start about the same time. So it means that we're looking at a potential for tens of thousands of jobs immediately.
And so basically within 3 years of your initial funding, you're expecting to have thousands of people employed.
Yes.
You're going to have 3 major revenue sources in place.
Hopefully by the end of this year.
And so that's part of, having multiple streams of income. And that's what we're trying to do for active investors, is we want to have those multiple streams of income.
Well, we're only at singular now. We're only at singular now, but we already have the others planned.
But what I said was in 3 years.
Oh,
and so
definitely,
you're 2 years in, you got another 12 months to have
Yeah.
3 sources of income. So that's a powerful business model. And one of the beauties of this business model is that other people in Africa are looking at this and saying, hey,
Oh, yes.
I want some of that.
We already have a bunch of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's another powerful part about this business, is that you've already, you've set the infrastructure, you've done some learning, you've built that expertise, and now you're going to have other avenues to apply that specialized knowledge. And so talk about your next great opportunity and then the next great opportunity.
Right. Well, once again, I'm a great proponent that if you're on the field, you have a chance to win. If you're not in the game, you have no shot at the championship. So we're in the game, and we really were very fortunate because other countries were looking at our model. They could come to our website, Agrismart Inc. Okay, which by the way, we have literally millions of views, and I think we're number one on the web in I don't know how many different categories, but 40 or 50 different categories. So
And
if
you
you
can
want to
see
look
that.
up,
That's what's back here,
yeah,
agrismartinc.com.
it's really an amazing website. We have just incredible people. Trey Warmay is responsible for our website. He's brilliant, and he really can present things in a way that everybody, when they look at it, immediately know what we're doing. So the Congo came to us. Governor Ngabila, who's the governor of Mondambe, which is one of the larger provinces in the Congo, a very prominent Congolese politician who is extraordinarily popular, came to us and said, David, tell us what you could do for our country. And I said, well, your country, once again, is in this fertile region, West Africa, where you have beautiful soil, and you should use your land to benefit your people. And my idea really at that point was I have been to the Ivory Coast 20 times in the last 3 years. I've been there literally 18 times in the last 2 years and 5 times in the last 4 months. So I go usually once a month. And I could recognize immediately the first thing you notice when you get out of the airport in the Ivory Coast is the tremendous pollution. It's a huge problem. They don't have the standards that we have in the West. And my first thought was, why is this country not running on biodiesel? That was my first thought. My first thought was less pollution, more jobs, made sense. So the first thing that came to mind when I was visited, and literally I was visited by Governor Ngabila, where he came to our boardroom and we talked, and I said, the way I see it is that you have the world's largest reserves of palm oil. Palm oil is the closest natural product to biodiesel. You use one esterification process. Or you can use a lot of different catalysts, alcohol, other things to convert the palm oil into biodiesel. And biodiesel is basically the same value as diesel. There is really very little difference. If you take a glass of biodiesel, you can stick it in an engine and run it. You took a glass of diesel, you could stick it in an engine and run it. If you wanted to mix them together, you can mix them together and run it. So my first idea was, why don't you concentrate on reducing pollution in your big cities in your country, like Kinshasa, which has 12 million people, large city. And I said, you know what? It takes 15 times the jobs. 15, remember, jobs are the single most important factor in Agrismart. For us, doing well by doing good is everything. And jobs really is what doing well by doing good is all about, really, getting good jobs for people. So I said, it'll create 15 times the jobs. I said, and then what it'll do is it'll reduce pollution in your country. And then on top of that, the most important thing for me is putting smiles on people's faces, instill a little hope, a little spirit, so they have something to look forward to, that perhaps their children will have a better life than they do. And I said to the governor, I said, a truck driver driving down the road will have a big smile on his face, which we said in our preliminary conversations, because he knows that he's going to be polluting less. He knows that he's provided jobs for his family, for his neighbors, and for his countrymen. And he knows that the biodiesel, every ounce of it that he's producing is going to be used for the good of the country. It means that we can use the land to create jobs and sustain, in a green, sustainable way. And the governor looked at me, and I'm not exaggerating. I think he hugged me and kissed me on both sides. He said, I won't accept anybody else but you and Agrismart. We want you to be involved with us. And we just recently signed, and I say this with a straight face, we signed a 5 million acre contract, of which we actually own 51% of it. They own 49% of it. And that contract is all about creating farming in the Congo. Now, the Congo is kind of like a mailman bites the dog story, because the Congo is really the Wild West. Yeah. Any way you want to shape it, it is not so the Ivory Coast.
You're going from the stable Ivory Coast to more risk.
So we're not involved presently. We have, I think I have about 6 months to prove whether we can raise the funds to produce this incredible product. And I should mention that there's another part of this sweetheart deal, and it is a sweetheart deal. And because basically we said we'll produce the world's largest biodiesel factory. We'll produce 250 million gallons of biodiesel a year. And by the way, the average ethanol factory in the United States, which was produced in the last 15 years, is 100 million gallons. So we're not out of the ballpark. The largest ethanol factory in the world, I think, is in Brazil, is 250 million gallons. We felt we can produce this incredible 250 million gallon a year factory because they have all of the land that could possibly you could want to produce the fruit that can produce the biodiesel. So basically, I said to the government, if you're willing to put our product into your fuel supply, if you'll buy it, we'll come up with the funds and we'll create the factory. So basically, the model, and this is strictly just a model, this is a conversation where we're talking about our dreams and our goals. Okay. Our dream is that we can produce the biodiesel at a very inexpensive rate, probably around, my best guess is $500 a ton. And it would be sold for what we're doing. We're looking at selling it at about $800 to $1,000. So it means that we make about 50%. The government owns 49%. We own 51%. They actually offered us more.
Yeah.
I came back and said, no, I want us to be basically equal partners. I want the government to benefit as we benefit because I want them to use that money to be put into their infrastructure. So we have a deal with them, which is basically a multi-billion-dollar deal where we're sitting on top of this incredible opportunity.
Yeah, and I just want to remind the folks listening, remember, 1 million acres should yield, once it's fully functional, over $1 billion in revenue each year.
That's $5 billion.
And so that's potential for $5 billion plus.
It's well more than
basis.
$5 billion.
Yeah.
I should mention that as we clear the land, wood pellets are a big, you know, I'm an idiot savant when it comes to numbers. I don't know why. I don't know anything else in life, but I know numbers. So, the pellet production in the world, has been going up dramatically. And there are coal-fired plants in Britain and other European countries which have converted over from coal to wood pellets. Okay? They claim that the wood pellet industry will increase from, I think it's 29 million metric tons a year to about 45 or 50 million metric tons in the next couple of years. We have tens of millions of metric tons of hardwood on our land. So as we're clearing, we have the opportunity to produce wood chips, produce fertilizer, produce all kinds of ideas. We have the ability to produce wood pellets, for example, working with wood pellet companies to take our product off the land and being able to use it to fire up, electric plants around the world, large electric.
And that's wood that's already sitting there.
Oh,
and it's going to need to be
taken
taken
go somewhere.
off. Yeah, it's got to be taken off as you start getting ready to
we
do some
figured we had
crops.
5 million metric tons minimum on our lands in the Ivory Coast of wood. And the interesting part is we also discovered that in some of our palm oil lands, palm oil makes really the world's best wood pellet because there's actually oil, in the pellet itself. And we did some research on that and found out, yes, it does, in fact, make great wood pellets. So we need to take down the mature palm oil trees and plant new trees, which means more jobs for everybody. And it also means that we can produce more wood pellets without destroying forests.
And so right now you have agreements with Ivory Coast, you have agreement with the Congo. And I know I don't have to mention any of these countries because I know they're still preliminary.
The most famous country in Africa has offered us a 2 million acre deal.
But there's a number of other countries that are watching the model and are interested in engaging you once that model proves itself.
I wanted to mention one other thing too. Our contract, it was a government agent with a government agency, deals with lands that are not presently being farmed. Okay, so we're not taking jobs away from farmers in what we're doing with respect to corn farming, and we're not farming on land that is presently in use in any way, shape, or form. We're dealing in savanna areas which are, rich farmland that will create jobs. So it's a win-win-win proposition for everybody. We go into lands that are untilled. There aren't very many inhabitants on that land. Everybody in the area is promised a job, and everybody wins because we're able to produce a green, sustainable product that basically feeds the world.
And it's jobs, and it's healthcare, it's education,
and energy.
and energy.
And don't forget clean water.
And so Agrismart provides that great opportunity where you have this proven innovation being applied in a new way.
Right.
There's certainly growth potential. And so for people that are interested in learning more about investing, what are you anticipating over the next 12 to 24 months for people that might want to get involved with Agrismart?
Well, we raised our initial capital, and now we're we realize that we need more capital to do what we need to do. If anybody's interested, they're welcome to go to our website and probably write us an email or whatever. But we're now involved in raising hundreds of millions of dollars for our project.
Right, and
That's our goal.
That's for each different aspect. So part of it
Right,
is
but
the
there's
energy, part of it is the equipment.
There's room for anybody who is interested in getting involved. And if they have, a good heart and they're interested in doing well by doing good, I think they should look at our website and literally write us an email, and every email will be answered.
And so part of this is if you want to have an impact with your investments, and if you want to have an opportunity to help other folks with your money, but also have a profitable potential business, that's what we're looking for with the Active Investor Club. And that's why I thought it was helpful to have you on, because this is right down the middle for the people that are looking to do this well. It's enormous opportunity. And, really once, it can be $1 billion company next year. It can be a multi-billion-dollar company the year after that, and so on and so on. And that's part of the power. We want to look for big opportunities. And while we're looking for big opportunities, we also want to be able to have an impact on the people around us.
Right. And speaking about the impact, we have, I'm not going to name them, but everybody who's watching this broadcast will know the names of some of our investors. We have some very well-known investors and some very well-known investment trusts that invested with us. And one of our investors said it, I think, better than anybody, and everyone will know this name. But he said to me, my wife and I are just so excited by this project because the idea of helping one child means the world to us. And what you're doing is not only helping a child, but helping many children and many families to a better life. And I thought that was really what we were all about. When you boil it down, it really comes down to, at the end of the day, feeling good about yourself, knowing that you made an impact and you helped someone else to a better life, and at the same time made a good choice in investment as well.
And that's part of people unleashing the power of their assets. People that have money in a mutual fund or just money that's sitting there, none of that money is going to a company. None of that money is employing someone or buying equipment or helping anybody.
I want to go a step further. I was at Starbucks in Potomac, Maryland a couple of months ago. And I was sitting at the table. We have our table at Starbucks at 9 a.m. in the morning with all my friends have been going on for 20 years or whatever. And these 5 gentlemen came over and said, "Excuse me, you wouldn't mind moving from the table?" And I said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, what did you say?" I said, "You're welcome to join me." So the 5 of them joined me, and guess what they were talking about? It turns out that they were heads of a company in New York that owned 432,000 rental units throughout the United States. And they were buying up half of Bethesda, okay? And they were talking about money like going out to yin yang. I never heard more money talked about in my life. These were companies, $1 billion companies, okay? And I looked at all 5 of them and I said to them, you're all fairly young. No one in that group was older than I am. And I said, you need another apartment complex? I mean, don't you have 2 yachts now? Don't you have 3 jet planes? I'm sure you have homes in like half the continents. I know you have one in the Hamptons and Palm Beach. I said, don't you think that in 3 years from now, with shortages on our shelves of farm goods, that maybe you ought to consider helping other people to do good in this world? One of them tapped me on the shoulder and he said, you're right. He said, yeah, we're not going to be able to feel good about ourselves unless we do something really more than just buy another apartment complex. And literally, everyone at that table agreed that, there comes a point in time when, why do you need any more money? I haven't figured this out yet. Why do you need any more money? Why not do things that help people throughout the world to a better life?
and use your capital more effectively. But it has to be in a
Absolutely.
place where the great opportunities are. And what we know is that in Africa, that's, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, that's where the greatest opportunities are going to be.
Right. And everybody said to me when we started, this sounds like a nonprofit situation. And I said, capitalism actually works better.
Yeah.
Capitalism.
It's had 500 years. 500 years, it's worked pretty good.
Yeah, it's worked very good. And I think capitalism is a better way to go about this. If we want people in West Africa and throughout the continent, and by the way, our slogan is transforming the face of the continent. And that's exactly what the leaders of some nations in the Ivory Coast and the Congo think that we're doing. It's all about transforming the face of a continent and giving people, a new spirit and hope for the future. So I really want those people, people who have enormous amounts of money, to start realizing that there's an opportunity to really, every person can do so much good in this world. We're not asking anybody to lose any money. We want people to make a fair return on their money, and in this case, a very fair return on their money. But we want them to do it with the spirit that, at the end of the day, you want to feel real good about yourself because you did something special. Now, Americans are very myopic to an extent because we think most of the hedge funds, for example, have to invest strictly within our borders. Well, the truth is that there are opportunities throughout the world that literally dwarf the opportunity that we have here in America. We have a continent that is coming to life. As I said, when I showed the picture of the farmers with the phones, that represents the difference between 50 years or 100 years ago, or even 20 years ago, when Africa didn't really appreciate, and people in remote areas didn't appreciate how people in other parts of the world live. Now they know how we live. And guess what? Everybody wants a better life for their children. So everybody we deal with in Africa, they are so open-minded about accepting what we're doing. We will not farm any acre of land in Africa without using organic compounds which provide for fertilizer and for pesticide. We will not do that. And getting on to that story that I was telling about Geneva, here's how it really happened with regard to our organic compound, which, by the way, increases the yield by exponential factors. When one of our suppliers said to us that this product is so safe that you can put it in a glass and drink it, I was like, yeah, right. Like, I'm going to drink pesticide, right? Yeah, that's going to happen, which will destroy the Zika and malaria, mosquitoes' ability to reproduce. And so we were coming back on Air France flight, and I'm talking with a gentleman that you'll appreciate. His son played for the University of Texas. So we're talking baseball. And, that's my favorite subject, is really baseball. So anyhow, we're talking about his son. And I said, so where are you coming back from? He goes, I'm coming back from the Geneva Convention in Switzerland. And I said, what was the convention about? He goes, oh, it's about organic pesticides and fertilizers. I went, you're kidding. He goes, no, we have this organic fertilizer and pesticide you can actually put in a glass and drink it. And I said, that's it. I know we're on the right track.
And particularly, when we're looking at the opportunities, you talked a little bit about the wood, the wood pellets.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, those electronic payments are booming across Africa.
That's what all the phones are about.
Yeah, many other side businesses that I know that you're looking at, that there's opportunities for folks. And the reality is the U.S. right now is changing its relationship with the rest of the world. And, that's what we're doing. And so as the U.S. pulls back, what we know is that nature abhors a vacuum. And as the U.S. pulls back, there's going to be great opportunities for those who are able to put themselves in the right spot. So
you are so intuitive. It just rings so true what you're saying, because in West Africa, the Chinese and Indians are buying up every single ounce of land they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
And the problem that the West African governments see with this is that when the Chinese come in, they have so many problems at home. They bring in their workers, they take the product out, and it doesn't really benefit the local economy. In the Ivory Coast, they love America. It's one of the countries around the world they just love Americans, and they want American investment more than any other. The opportunity to bring in cars, the opportunity to bring in trucks, the opportunity to bring in all kinds of goods is so open and available to American entrepreneurs right now. When we go to West Africa, we see cars that are 10 and 20 and 30 years old that are reeking pollution. I mean, just inefficient. We have the ability, we could take literally a transport ship and transport thousands of vehicles there, and they'd be sold so rapidly. They want American trucks over there, they want American equipment. And a lot of American entrepreneurs really should look toward West Africa for that opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's going to be great opportunities over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and that's where we want to go. And so H. David Meyer, Agrismart, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you always have something else to say, so would you like to add anything to our conversation?
Well, the world is going to be suffering from food shortages in the coming years, and it's already prevalent. The Malthusian theory basically said that the food supply grows in an arithmetic ratio and the population grows at a geometric proportion. And so we have to really look toward the future to try to avoid some of the problems that we're going to be facing. The biggest problems we're going to be facing in the world are food, clean water,
And energy.
and energy. So they go hand in hand. Literally, if you are someone who's concerned about the health of the planet, we want to be involved in green sustainability. We want to be involved in energy that makes sense. We want to be involved in farming that benefits everyone. And we want to be involved in medical care that makes, a difference in people's lives. So what I leave your audience with is basically that very concept that was generated hundreds of years ago, that we have to look toward increasing our food supply because the population is increasing in momentous proportions. When you and I grew up, there were 3 billion people on the planet. There are over 7 billion people on the planet now. They're projecting 9 or 10 billion people in the coming years. We are going to be experiencing food shortages on our grocery shelves. We already know that we have problems with poultry production, for example. And incidentally, we wanted to talk about other avenues, and I wanted to end this on my side. What I have to add is that part of what we're doing is corn production goes hand in hand with hog production, poultry production, and livestock. And if ever a continent was ever in need of those three, livestock options, that's it, because they need all three desperately. Most countries in West Africa import most of their meat when they could be producing it there locally. So I leave my last word to be, remember Malthus.
And so, and so for the active investors out there that want your assets to be providing some impact out there, the key is finding a company like Agrismart. And so agrismartinc.com, you can learn more about, what impact they're having now and where they plan on going over the next several years. And they're looking for investors to help in their second and third round of funding. And so there are opportunities for people that want to have a real impact, that want to be employing people, that want your assets to be doing something as opposed to just sitting there. And so that's what being a member of the Active Investor Club is all about, is making sure that we're using our assets in a productive fashion and growing for the future. So H. David Meyer, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a real pleasure.